What's the most unforgettable thing that ever happened to you at work? You never forget the first time someone dies right in front of you. I was 23, fresh out of nursing school, working the night shift at a notoriously busy New York City ER. Nights were usually chaotic: gunshot wounds, overdoses, people mangled in car crashes. But that night was different. It was eerily calm. No alarms, no sirens, no desperate shouting. Just the low hum of fluorescent lights and the faint beep of heart monitors. I remember sitting at the nurse's station around 2 a.m., sipping bad coffee and flipping through patient charts, when the doors slammed open so hard they bounced off the walls. 2 paramedics burst in, pushing a stretcher carrying a man, maybe mid-30s, pale as a ghost. His shirt was soaked red. 3 gunshot wounds to the chest. We moved fast. Adrenaline took over. I grabbed gloves, gauze, tried to stem the bleeding. The trauma team descended like a well-practiced dance. Blood pooled on the floor as we cut his shirt away. His breathing was ragged, shallow. And then he looked at me, right at me. His eyes weren't wild with fear like you'd expect. They were calm, almost resigned, dark brown, glassy, locked onto mine with a kind of silent message. He knew. Somehow he knew he wasn't walking out of there. We tried everything. Chest compressions, intubation, adrenaline shots. The attending doctor barked orders, the monitor flatlined, someone started CPR again. The noise blurred into a cacophony of sounds, beeps, commands, the thud of compressions. I kept my hands busy, handing instruments, cleaning blood. But inside I was frozen, staring at that man's face, still and eerily peaceful. After 15 minutes, the attending called it. Time of death: 2:17 a.m. The room fell silent. The team dispersed quickly, already moving to the next emergency. I stood there for a minute longer than I should have, staring at the empty stretcher. Blood still trickled down the side. Someone tapped me on the shoulder, snapping me back to reality, and I went to the break room. I sat alone, staring at the wall, not even touching my coffee. I kept replaying it in my head, the way he had looked at me, not afraid, not angry, just accepting. That was the night I understood something about this job they don't teach you in school. Sometimes, no matter how hard you fight, you lose. And sometimes the patients know it before you do. You expect CEOs to be bulletproof, stoic, composed, always in control. Ours was exactly that. Sharp suits, sharper tongue, the kind of woman who could reduce a room full of executives to nervous wrecks with a single raised eyebrow. The quarterly meeting was standard procedure. Senior staff, board members, all seated around a polished mahogany table in a glass-walled conference room high above London. Outside, the city buzzed. Inside, it was silent, except for the clicking of a projector and the CEO's clipped, confident voice as she dissected numbers and future projections. I sat near the back, notepad open, pretending to take notes. I had seen her do this dozens of times. She was a machine. But that day, something was off. Midway through a presentation slide, she paused. Just a beat too long. Her hand, resting casually on the table, started to tremble. A few people shifted in their seats. She cleared her throat, tried to continue, but her voice cracked, a brittle, strained sound. Then she dropped the laser pointer. It clattered to the table, and she staggered back, one hand clutching the chair. And then right there in front of the entire executive team, she collapsed. It wasn't a graceful faint. It was a total, uncontrolled collapse, her body folding in on itself and hitting the floor hard. Papers scattered, coffee cups tipped. For a moment, no one moved. The woman who terrified us, who ran this multi-million-pound company like a battlefield general, was lying unconscious at our feet. Finally, the CFO sprang up, barking orders. Someone called an ambulance. A couple of us hovered awkwardly, not knowing what to do. What stuck with me wasn't the fall, it was what happened next. The hierarchy shattered. The men who used to smugly interrupt others fell silent. The polished veneer cracked. Fear, Real, human fear filled the room. Paramedics arrived quickly. They wheeled her out, oxygen mask over her face. She survived. A severe panic attack, they said later. She never returned. She resigned quietly a few weeks afterward. For weeks, people whispered about it in the break room, analyzing every detail, speculating about her private life, her pressures. But what I remember most is the lesson I learned. Power is an illusion. Even the strongest, the most intimidating people can break. And when they do, it happens fast and ugly. Since that day, every time I sit in a meeting and see someone bark orders, I wonder what storm they're hiding under the surface. You don't think about dying at work. Not really. Sure, construction is risky, but you trust the hard hats, the safety harnesses, the daily briefings. You tell yourself, that's for other people. It was a crisp fall morning in Vancouver. I was helping build a new mid-rise office tower downtown, a 10-story glass beast that would one day house law firms and startups. Back then, it was just a skeleton of steel beams and concrete slabs. That day, we were lifting a massive steel girder, 4,000 pounds of pure industrial muscle, into place on the 8th floor. The crane operator, a guy named Joe with 20 years on the job, handled the controls. We trusted Joe. I was standing on the slab below, guiding the beam into place with hand signals. I remember the sun reflecting off the glass shards of nearby buildings, the smell of hot tar from fresh roofing. Everything was normal, until it wasn't. First, the cable holding the beam jerked, just a twitch, like a muscle cramp. Then came the sound, a deep groan of metal under stress. Everyone froze. The crane tipped, not much at first, but enough to notice. The beam started to sway, slowly at first, then faster. Joe's voice crackled over the radio, strained but calm. "Clear out! Now!" I didn't think. I ran, hearing shouts behind me, the clang of dropped tools, the thudding of heavy boots on concrete. Behind me, the beam swung wild, smashing into a scaffolding pole. The pole bent like it was made of tinfoil. I glanced back and saw the crane lurch again, tilting farther, the arm groaning under impossible strain. Joe fought it, manipulating the controls, somehow swinging the beam away from the main site. It crashed down onto an empty lot next door with a noise like the world ending, a deafening metallic roar, followed by silence so complete it rang in my ears. We were lucky. Stupidly, unbelievably lucky. The investigation later found a fault in the crane's hydraulic system, something no one could have predicted, a 1 in a million mechanical failure. I stayed in construction for a few more years, but I never stood under a suspended load again. To this day, whenever I walk under scaffolding or see a crane against the skyline, I feel that old fear, sharp and cold in my gut. You don't think about dying at work, until one day you realize how close it really is. If you've never seen a kitchen fire, you can't really understand how fast it happens. I was 19, fresh out of high school, working as a line cook in a busy Sydney restaurant. The kitchen was a madhouse, a blur of orders shouted over the clatter of pans, the hiss of oil, the slam of oven doors. I was the new guy, bottom of the hierarchy assigned to the fryer station. Drop the fries, don't mess up, keep your head down. Easy, right? That afternoon, the lunch rush hit like a tsunami. Orders piled up. The head chef barked at me to move faster. I was sweating, palms slick inside my gloves, heart pounding. I dropped a basket of fries, heard a sputter, and turned away for a second, just 1 second, to grab more. When I turned back, the fryer was a column of flame. It wasn't a small fire. Flames licked the stainless steel hood, black smoke coiling toward the ceiling. Someone screamed. The fire alarm blared. Pots clattered to the floor as people backed away. The head chef yelled something about the extinguisher, but in the chaos, his words were lost. I moved on instinct, grabbed the extinguisher, yanked the pin, aimed at the base of the fire like they taught us in orientation. The foam exploded out, smothering the flames. Smoke filled the kitchen, thick and acrid. Coughing, blinking against the sting, I kept spraying until the canister ran dry. The fire was out. The fryer was destroyed, but the kitchen, and everyone in it, was safe. Afterwards, sitting outside in the cool air, my hands still shaking, the head chef came over. He didn't say much, just clapped me on the back and muttered, "Good work, kid." It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't heroic, but it was real. That day taught me something most jobs don't. When it all goes wrong, you can't wait for someone else to fix it. You move, you act, even if you're terrified, especially if you're terrified. Trust is easy when you're young and ambitious, when you believe that everyone is in it together, chasing the same dream. At 27, I landed my dream job at a Berlin startup, a hip, fast-growing tech company where the coffee was free and the dress code was whatever. It felt like joining a family, late nights, beer Fridays, brainstorming sessions that stretched into early morning pizza runs. And then there was Marcus. We started the same week, clicked instantly, bonded over bad code and worse coffee. He was sharp, funny, driven. We pushed each other, covered for each other, shared victories and failures. When the company announced it was promoting one junior engineer to lead a new team, I thought we both had a shot. I didn't begrudge Marcus when he got it. He deserved it. Or so I thought. It started small. Weird looks in meetings, projects reassigned without explanation. Then came the late-night Slack messages from colleagues. "Hey, just heard some stuff Marcus said about you. You okay?" Turns out, Marcus had been undermining me for months. Quietly, subtly, taking credit for my work, blaming his mistakes on me behind closed doors. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just smiled and said, "It's not personal, it's business." That smile gutted me more than the betrayal. I quit 2 weeks later, left the startup, the city, the life I thought I wanted. It wasn't the end, though. I found a new job at a company where collaboration wasn't just a buzzword, where loyalty meant something. But I never forgot Marcus, or the lesson he taught me. Trust is precious. And sometimes the people you think are friends are just smiling faces waiting for the right moment to push you under the bus. You don't understand panic until you're responsible for a child who's gone missing. I was 20, working part-time at a big box retail store in Ohio, the kind with endless aisles of merchandise and 100 places for a kid to hide. Most shifts were boring, zoning shelves, answering questions about where the batteries were. That Saturday, the store was packed. Families wandered through with shopping carts overflowing. I was stocking a display of winter jackets when I saw her. A young woman, maybe early 30s, standing frozen in the aisle, looking around frantically. I heard her before I saw her. "Michael? Michael!" Her voice cracked. She turned, panic radiating off her, scanning the crowd. A lost kid. I ditched the jackets and approached her. She said her son, 4 years old, had been holding her hand 1 minute, gone the next. I grabbed my walkie-talkie and called a code Atom, the store's missing child protocol. Security locked the doors immediately. Employees abandoned registers and stocking carts and fanned out. I started in the toy section. It's always the first place kids go. I checked under shelves, behind racks, even inside playhouses on display. Nothing. The mom was crying openly now, shaking, barely able to answer security's questions. Minutes dragged on. Every second felt heavier. What if someone had taken him? What if he was already outside? I moved to the clothing section, scanning each row, and then I saw movement, a tiny foot poking out from under a rack of puffy jackets. I crouched down and found him, a little boy, curled up, giggling, like it was a game. I called his name gently. He looked up, wide-eyed, confused why this wasn't funny. I took his hand and led him back to the front, where his mother broke down completely, dropping to her knees and hugging him so tight he squealed. Afterwards, once things calmed down, she found me by the jackets and hugged me too, whispering, "Thank you, thank you." It was a happy ending, but I couldn't shake the thought how easily it could have gone the other way. 1 second, one distraction. Since then, every time I see a kid wandering alone in a store, I watch just in case. You don't forget a feeling like that. Sometimes danger doesn't announce itself. It creeps up quietly, and you only realize how close you were once it's too late. I was 19, broke and desperate for a summer job when I landed one working the docks in Barcelona. Not glamorous work, loading cargo containers, hauling chains, baking under the Mediterranean sun, but it paid better than waiting tables. Most days blurred together in a haze of sweat and diesel fumes. The docks were alive with movement, forklifts beeping, cranes groaning, men shouting orders in Spanish and Catalan. One afternoon, I was helping guide a container, a massive steel box the size of a small house, onto a freighter. The forklift driver, a rookie, was struggling. You could see it in the jerky way the load swung, the way the tires buckled slightly under the weight. I stood on the loading platform, signaling him forward, waving my hand in the standard gesture to guide. And then, something shifted. The container tilted dangerously. I heard a metallic screech as the forklift wobbled. The driver panicked, slammed the brake too hard, and the container swung out, right toward me. Someone shouted, but I didn't wait to hear what. Instinct took over. I dove to the side just as the container slammed down where I'd been standing. The ground shook. Dust exploded into the air. I sat up, heart hammering, palms scraped raw from the fall. The container lay on its side, dented and smoking from the impact. The foreman tore into the forklift driver, screaming so loud even the seagulls took off. But I barely heard him. I was staring at the spot where, 10 seconds earlier, I'd been standing. That job paid for my first year of college. It put food on the table, but I never set foot on a dock again. Sometimes you don't realize how thin the line is between life and death until you trip right over it. They don't tell you in customer service training that one day you might have to face a knife-wielding maniac over a cup of coffee. I was 22, working in a little cafe tucked into a side street in Paris. It was a cozy place, chipped wooden tables, yellow light, the smell of fresh bread and burnt espresso hanging in the air. That afternoon was slow. Rain drizzled against the windows. A man in a suit came in. Mid-40s, briefcase, neatly trimmed beard. He ordered an espresso, sat by the window, and pulled out a newspaper. I made the coffee carefully. I always did, and brought it over. He took a sip. Paused. Sipped again. His face darkened. He waved me over. I walked up, already guessing the complaint. Too cold, too bitter, not enough crema. Instead, he slammed the cup down hard enough that coffee splashed onto the table. He stood up, shouting in rapid, angry French. Customers looked up, startled. I apologized, offered to make another. He ignored me, shouting louder, knocking his chair over. Then he pulled a pocket knife from his coat and snapped it open. The cafe froze. I froze. The manager, an old Parisian woman named Claudine who had seen it all, stepped forward slowly, hands raised. She spoke calmly, soothingly, while inching toward the counter where the phone was. I stood still, heart pounding. The man's hand shook slightly, the knife wavering in the air. After what felt like hours, but was probably seconds, Claudine managed to talk him down. He backed away, muttering, and left the cafe, the bell above the door jingling absurdly as he went. The police picked him up 2 blocks away. He had a record, violent outbursts, mostly in public places. We closed early that day. Claudine poured us each a shot of cheap brandy and said, "Bienvenue à Paris, mon petit." Welcome to Paris, kid. I stayed at that cafe for another year, but I never served another espresso without glancing at the customer's hands first. Some jobs leave no room for mistakes. Working around high-voltage electricity is one of them. When I was 21, I landed an internship at a massive power plant on the outskirts of Delhi. It was a gritty, noisy place, endless rows of transformers, towering pylons, the constant hum of energy. I was proud to be there, even if all they let me do was shadow the real engineers and take notes. On my second month, I was assigned to assist during a routine maintenance check. The job was simple. Make sure the circuits were powered down, the breakers locked, the lines safe. The lockout-tagout process was drilled into us. Shut down the line, isolate the power, place a lock on the breaker, and tag it with your name. No exceptions. That day I followed instructions, mostly. I shut down the breaker but got distracted halfway through tagging it. A senior engineer called my name from across the floor, asking for help with something else. I hurried over, meaning to come back and finish the tag in a minute. I forgot. Minutes later, another engineer went to work on the supposedly deadline. As he reached out, sparks exploded, loud enough to make everyone in the room flinch. He jumped back just in time, unhurt but shaken. I realized immediately what had happened. My stomach dropped. My heart raced. I came clean, trembling, expecting to be fired on the spot. Instead, my supervisor sat me down in the control room, stared at me for a long, heavy minute, and said, "You don't get second chances with electricity. Learn from this, or leave." I stayed. I learned. I double-checked everything. Triple-checked. That scare, that near miss, has stuck with me more than any textbook lesson ever could. Even now, years later, every time I turn a switch, every time I sign off on a safety checklist, I hear his voice in my head. You don't get second chances. People think safaris are glamorous, all sunsets and giraffes and Instagram pictures. They don't think about how close you are to death every minute. I spent a summer working at a safari lodge in South Africa, helping guide tourists through the bush. It was supposed to be an adventure, a break before graduate school. One morning, just after sunrise, I stepped out of the staff quarters to prep for a bushwalk, a casual stroll through the savannah where guests could spot animals on foot, under the safe guidance of a ranger with a rifle. I closed the door behind me, turned, and froze. 20 feet away, barely visible in the golden grass, stood a lioness. Full-grown, muscles coiled, eyes locked onto me. There was a moment, a horrible, stretched-out moment, where neither of us moved. I knew the rules: don't run, don't turn your back, don't make sudden movements, but knowing something and doing it are two very different things. I stood still, trying to look non-threatening, heart hammering so loudly I thought she could hear it. The lioness flicked her tail, took one slow step forward. Time slowed. My mouth went dry. And then, a miracle. She shifted her gaze, gave a small huff through her nose, and turned away, disappearing into the grass as silently as she had appeared. My legs gave out. I sat right there on the dirt, shaking, too scared to even call for help. Later, the head guide told me I was lucky. Sometimes lions bluff, sometimes they don't. I worked the rest of the season, but I never forgot that moment. The raw, unfiltered proximity to death. People think safaris are all romance and adventure. What they don't see is how thin the line really is between being a visitor and being prey.